The sterile white walls of the emergency room felt impossibly cold that afternoon, and yet the heaviness pressing on Daniel Harper's chest made it feel like the world outside had disappeared entirely. At 38, his life had been a careful balance of work and raising his 8-year-old daughter, Lily, a whirlwind of curiosity and empathy that could soften even the hardest day. But as he sat slumped in the hard plastic chair, clutching the hospital clipboard with trembling hands, the weight of exhaustion and helplessness crushed him. He had come in for what he thought was a routine checkup, only to discover a frightening diagnosis that he couldn't even begin to process. His jaw tightened against the panic rising in his throat, and for the first time in years Daniel allowed the tears to fall, unnoticed by anyone but himself. If this story moves you, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel Soul of Light. If you believe in kindness and second chances, the fluorescent lights above did nothing to soften the sharp edges of his fear, and every passing nurse or doctor seemed to blur into a haze of indifference. Outside, the sunlight filtered through the tall windows, casting soft gold streaks across the linoleum floor, mocking the turmoil in his heart. Lily sat quietly beside him, her small hand resting on his knee, her brown eyes wide with concern. She had always been perceptive, always able to sense when life tilted too far on its axis, and she didn't ask questions she couldn't handle. Instead, she let him cry, humming softly under her breath, a fragile anchor in a sea of despair. Daniel's mind raced with the practicalities he usually handled without a second thought. How he would tell Lily's teachers if things worsened, how he would make sure she had what she needed, how he could possibly keep his daughter's world intact when his own felt like it was falling apart. The denim jacket he wore, faded from years of errands, playground visits, and late-night drives, felt heavier than ever, the fabric soaked with sweat and grief. His boots tapped the floor in unconscious rhythm, a drumbeat of anxiety that refused to let him forget the reality he tried to shield Lily from. Then, without warning, a shadow appeared beside him. A woman, weary and pale, with messy dark hair framing a face marked by exhaustion and faint bruises, sat down on the chair next to his. Her jacket was dark green, her pants simple and functional, yet her presence carried an aura of calm that made the edges of his panic flicker. Daniel noticed the contrast immediately, someone so clearly struggling herself, yet somehow radiating a strength he longed for. She didn't speak at first, simply letting him sob, her hands clasped loosely in her lap, her eyes heavy with understanding. Her name was Veronica Lane, a 45-year-old billionaire widow whose life had been public, glamorous, and seemingly untouchable. Yet here she was, in the quiet of the ER, no entourage, no pretense, only a pale, human presence beside a man who had never met her. When she finally spoke, her voice was low but steady, carrying a weight of compassion and hard-earned wisdom. "You're not alone," she said. The words were simple, but they hit Daniel like a lifeline thrown across a stormy sea. Something in that moment, the shared recognition of pain, the quiet acknowledgement of fear, made the room feel slightly less cold, the sunlight slightly warmer. Daniel blinked back tears, suddenly aware of how raw and exposed he felt. He had spent years pretending he could handle everything alone, wearing a mask of stern competence, but the truth was that life as a single father had been relentless, and he was human. His daughter's small hand squeezed his, grounding him, reminding him of why he needed to breathe, why he needed to survive this storm. Veronica's presence didn't fix anything, but it gave him permission to feel, to be weak without shame, and that simple act of being seen felt revolutionary. Days in the hospital blurred together, but the ordinary moments, the sunlight spilling across the nurse's station, the muted laughter of children in the pediatric wing, the smell of fresh coffee from the small vending area, reminded Daniel that life continued outside of his fear. Veronica appeared intermittently, sometimes silently sharing the room with him, other times offering small, practical gestures that hinted at her own struggles. A reassuring hand on his shoulder, a shared sandwich during long waits, a quiet smile that acknowledged his courage. She never intruded, never judged. She simply existed alongside him, a mirror reflecting resilience he didn't know he had. Lily began to open up too, her natural curiosity bridging the chasm of her father's anxiety. She asked questions, tentatively at first, about Veronica's life, about why she seemed so tired, why grown-ups sometimes cry. And in her questions, Daniel found a strange relief, a reminder that innocence and hope could coexist with pain, that the future still held possibility. Veronica answered with honesty tempered by grace, telling stories of loss and rebuilding, of strength born not from wealth, but from the willingness to sit with suffering and let it teach you something. Weeks passed. Daniel's condition remained serious but manageable, and with Veronica's encouragement, he began taking the first tentative steps back toward normal life. Simple things, a walk in the park with Lily, watching her climb the jungle gym with fearless joy, sharing a quiet meal without checking his phone every 10 seconds, felt monumental. Veronica's presence was less constant now, but the memory of her quiet reassurance lingered in his thoughts like sunlight trapped in amber, a reminder that connection and compassion could appear in the most unexpected places. The day came when Daniel could finally leave the hospital. He walked through the automatic doors with Lily skipping ahead, her laughter ringing through the bright afternoon air, and felt a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. Veronica was waiting outside, her dark green jacket now dusted with the sun's soft glow. They shared a brief, wordless acknowledgment, no grand gestures, no promises, just the understanding that sometimes the smallest act of kindness could shift the trajectory of a life. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Soul of Light. Your support can help remind everyone that no one has to face their struggles completely alone. As Daniel and Lily walked away, he glanced back to see Veronica watching them, her face pale but calm, her presence a quiet reminder of humanity's fragile, enduring strength. He felt a deep swell of gratitude, not just for the help she had offered, but for the lesson she embodied, that vulnerability was not weakness, and that even in the darkest rooms, a single act of understanding could light the way. Before you leave, please take a moment to leave a comment sharing how this story made you feel. Your words could be the encouragement someone else needs today.